All right, now you should be able to hear me. Good grief. I wish I could say that's the first time that's ever happened, but it's totally not. It happens all the time. Thank you, Darius. Ugh. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it has happened the last like 3 office hours. All right, so let me start over. Hi, welcome to Office Hours. Uh, um, Excited to be here today. There's even somebody here. Why didn't you tell me? Uh, but anyway, this is your chance to ask me questions, and I will do my best to answer. I also have the Call Kent podcast where you can ask questions, and the nice thing about that is it's a weekly, daily thing. More people will, or it's easier to consume because it's like isolated on specific single question, whereas this is just like a bunch of random thoughts and questions back and forth and stuff. The nice thing about this is we have video, so if you need to like share a bunch of code or something, it's easy to do that. And yeah, and then you can ask throughout the week in the text channel under meetups, KCD Office Hours in the Discord, and I can answer that when we come together. And this is the oldest question, so I'll start here. But I do give priority to people who are in the Zoom call. And I just noticed that Nick joined, and Nick did ask a question, so I'll answer yours first, Nick. And then anybody else who's in Zoom can feel free to ask and interrupt me as we go, because you're here, so you get priority. So hi, Nick. It's good to see you. I'll just read through your question, and then you can give any like fill in any whatever if needed. Okay. An app with resizable panels. I want to make the content in the panels responsive. I'm wondering which approach you'd go with in the video. I'm using container queries. I'm using a third-party Tailwind plugin and a polyfill for container queries. I like the idea of using container queries because it means the component doesn't have to render like it would if we were to change the Tailwind classes with JavaScript as the panel is being resized. It also seems to be forward-thinking as it's where things are heading. However, I'm a little uncertain about using experimental API with a polyfill for production app. I see that on Tailwind UI website, they are using iframes for all their examples to show the responsiveness when it's resized. Tested that out too. Not sure it's a great solution. Okay, so for the Tailwind UI specific example, I think it makes total sense that they are doing iframes for their examples. In particular, because they're trying to say like, here's your website, and here's like what it would look like if this were in your website. So I think it makes a lot more sense for them to use iframes there rather than container queries. For using container, I'll look at it here in a second, but for using container queries, my first thought is yes, this is something that's probably going to happen eventually. I feel like we've been saying that for an exceedingly long time though. So I don't really keep up with where things are in the CSS world. But yeah, we've just been talking about container queries for a really long time. So I wouldn't be surprised if things change in significant ways, or things just never end up shipping or whatever. I'm not sure what the current status of that is, but it just doesn't feel any closer than it has been for all these years. So I probably wouldn't personally bet on container queries, but I think that it's worth investigating and learning more about and like seeing what the current status is, how solid the APIs are, and how good the polyfills are. That's another thing, is I'm not sure how you polyfill CSS stuff. I'm pretty sure you have to use JavaScript to polyfill it, which is what you would do if you didn't have the polyfill. Like the solution is to use JavaScript. So either way, you're using JavaScript. And so I don't necessarily see CSS polyfills as a bad thing. And so maybe it's perfectly fine. So speaking specifically about your what you're trying to do, I'm guessing, Nick, this is your UI that you're building. Is that right? Yeah. So you've got this. You want to have this resize relative to its size on the page, not relative to the size of the entire page, presumably because you can have a bunch of these panels, right? So you don't want to have to say, well, if the screen size is this wide, then it needs to be this big, unless there are like 30 more panels, in which case it needs to be different. Like it just, the permutations of that just go nuts. So container queries, that's precisely what container queries are intended to solve, I think. I'd be curious to know, this looks very similar to VS Code and how they do tabs and all that. I'd be really curious to find out how they are doing that. But yeah, so like, I think that, yeah, before starting, relies on container polyfill. Yeah, that's, yeah, I would just, I'll look at this. Oh yeah, we've got Surma on here. So that always helps, like, and Jack, people that I recognize, it always helps to see, oh, okay, so it's not just like somebody's random idea, but it's, you know, people who are participating in these types of conversations are participating in the actual polyfills. So I think that's reasonable. From what I can tell, it looks like this would actually be a fine thing to use. That's probably how I would do what you're trying to do. That demo that you showed, is that live working with this polyfill?
Yeah. If you play it again, you can kind of see how the form actually, those two input columns drop down below each other in the button. So it was actually, the reason I like this actually is because all we had to do was replace all the media query variants that Tailwind provides in the Tailwind UI with the container query variants. Like, it was a pretty easy swap, and it just kind of works now with this. So I kind of like that solution,
yeah,
rather than trying to kind of have like use almost two separate components, or use like a function to calculate like what the class names are based on the width of this particular container here. And I did, like, I just added a console log on this component, and it doesn't re-render this whole component with the container queries. So I have no idea how polyfills work, but I'm assuming that like it does that kind of up front, maybe in the build phase. I don't quite know like how it would do all, because like I see that library is JavaScript, so it must kind of do something to make it work, but it doesn't seem like it's actually happening when this is being resized.
Yeah, so what's probably happening is they're doing all of that in like regular JavaScript, so it wouldn't trigger a re-render in React. That's fine. I'm guessing that if you pulled up the DevTools and looked at the class name, and as you drag it, you'll see class names change, right? That's what's happening? Yeah. So they're just doing that outside of React. Now that may have interesting implications with if React re-renders while those class names are being changed, because React is going to be like, hey, I'm going to control those class names, and then the whatever polyfill is like, no, I'm in charge of that. So I'm not sure how that would what impact that would have. My guess is that is very unlikely to ever be a problem in practical situation for you. So I think you're probably fine with using this and not worrying about that. Yeah, it's certainly not gonna, I would be very surprised if this was a performance bottleneck for you. Yeah, so it seems like a pretty solid solution.
Okay, so you think we should bet on container queries then for this?
Yeah, yeah, I do. Like, I do think that they're going to happen eventually. And even if they don't, your alternative to this is basically building your own hacked version of container queries with JavaScript. I would rather use a polyfill of a thing that people are hoping becomes a reality than writing my own thing that will certainly never become one. Yeah, so I think you're probably better off using this.
Okay. It's probably more likely that something you write on your own would become reality than I write.
Well, I certainly have never had anything that I have written become a standard. So, yeah, anyway, yeah, good luck on that. That looks like a fun app to work on.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks, Kent. Appreciate it.
Sure thing. Akash, I just noticed you're, and I'm wondering if you're the same Akash that asked this question.
Yeah,
sweet. Hey. Thanks for the question. That was a good one. I certainly talked for plenty of time on that.
I want to thank you as well for answering in such a depth.
Yeah, absolutely. So you open GitHub issue related to React testing library. Not sure if we can discuss. Yeah, sure we can. I don't. Yeah, feel free to share a link. And actually, don't put it in the Zoom chat. If you could, put it in the Discord if you're there. If you're not, then I'll put it in there. It's just better for historical things.
Actually, I haven't opened up Discord, so
That's
that's
fine. You
why.
can send it to me, and I'll put it in Discord.
Sure, thank you.
But I'll just mention as you're doing that, I have not maintained testing library myself for, I think it's probably been like 2 years. And so like the other maintainers have taken that over and they're doing a stellar job, but I'm more than happy to give this a look. Okay, so we've got a app component, we've got a use effect with a set timeout. And yeah, pretty much anytime you see a set timeout, you're like, okay, yeah, we want to use fake timers, which is what you're doing here, because like nobody wants to wait for that timeout to finish in the test, right? So then you say use fake timers, render user event setup. Okay, so here's the problem. There is a problem with user event and fake timers, and yeah, so you have to create a special instance of user event with fake timers. And I actually updated the Epic React and testing JavaScript, the material for those to use this new API. But the videos are still not doing that. And so like in the material, I'm like, hey, by the way, you got to do this. So I think the Bookshelf app has this use fake timers. Yeah, in the, nope, that's not it. Let's go tests. My kids are yelling at me, and you probably can't hear them, but they're yelling, like tattling on each other, like Adam's got food down here. But he said he's on the tile, so that's fine. So this is a you have a fake timer user event, and that'll be the solution. You use that instead of user event, and this is how you say, hey, this is how we advance timers. So when you want to make time pass, this is what you should do to do that. It's basically what you're configuring user event to do. So I'll just paste that in here for everybody to take a look at. Yeah, sorry.
Yes. Actually, when my use case is on clicking of the button, I set some state, and on that basis, it will trigger the use effect in which we have written set timeout, right? So on the similar note, the code which you were showing me, so I'll create a fake timer user event, and I'll I'll simulate a click on it. Or how should I go about it? I haven't looked at the code yet, which you have shown me right now. So maybe I can try it my own, and then
Yeah. So with the fake timer user event, you use it just like a regular user event. So you can do
okay.
.click and type.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure what exactly the issue is. Basically, it was working fine with fire event, but not with user event.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? The other thing could be that user event is now async. And so, oh, and I see that you do actually have a setup here. So yeah, you just put your advanced timers config in that setup. But yeah, user.click is going to be async. So you'll need to await that. The trick, yeah, and actually that might solve it for you, because here, let's see. Okay, yeah, that just timed out. Yeah, I'm not even sure why that would have timed out. So what would happen here is you render this, you get the error button, you click on it. So what this seems to be saying is we got to the end of the test, or let's see. No, we didn't get to the end of the test. We were waiting this whole time. But I don't know what we'd be waiting for. Okay, so Yeah, so I think when you click on this, we trigger the set timeout. And so Jest is waiting for that set timeout callback to be called. That's what it seems to be airing out.
I tried to put console logs inside the callback of set timeout as well, but they are not rendering.
Yeah, that is consistent with what this is saying. But like you should get to this run all timers. I'm guessing you get to the console log, or you console logged in here as well to make sure that run all timers does run.
I'm not sure about this if I
Yeah.
have, but
It seems like run all timers should actually trigger this time set timeout callback to be run. So I am a little confused why it is timing out. But certainly I know I can see a couple of things that are wrong, and hopefully addressing those will fix this. So one being your setup should include the advanced timers config there, and then two, your user.click, it should be async.
yeah,
So
it
you await
it
that.
was async. So basically, I was just literally typing the code from my office laptop to my personal
Oh.
laptop. So I
Yeah,
forgot
that's all right.
to.
Yeah, that's all fine.
No
Cool. Well,
issues.
give that a shot, and if it doesn't work, then let me know.
Yeah.
And if it does work, if you could explain it or give the solution
sure.
in the comment there, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for it, Kent. Yeah.
Sure thing. Okay, great. Anybody else in the Zoom call have a question before I move on to the oldest question in Discord?
Yep, Kent, I actually had a question.
Sure.
More than a question, I just wanted to discuss one thing that I was going through the TypeScript branch in your Epic React workshop, and I just wanted to discuss one thing. So I'll just share one link. Just give me a moment. Just give me a moment. I'll paste it in Discord. I don't know why it doesn't.
Oh, okay. Is it this one? The Stack Overflow that you pasted in?
No, not that one.
Oh, okay.
It's a very long, actually.
Oh, you were just helping with the last one. Thank you.
Yeah. If you can go to the advanced React hooks Epic React workshop and the next branch.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah. Gotcha.
On GitHub. Yeah. Yeah. And if you just go to the second final version, second one, extra 4. One thing that I noticed here is that we have set up the status and everything in form of discriminated union, so that if the status is resolved, the data is the generic data type. So in this case, it should be Pokemon data. But in the use async hook, what we are doing is that when we are returning, we are destructuring it and returning. So actually, we are losing that discriminated union feature. No, at the very bottom when we are returning it. So we are returning it separately, not like we are destructuring that. So what happens is that if you go into Pokemon info where we are using this, and if you go to the switch statement and if you see the case resolved, and if you can copy this and paste in TypeScript Playground, you'll see that Pokemon is actually of type any. So so I just thought if you're accepting pull requests for this, I can make a pull request for that.
Yeah.
Probably one solution could be to not destructure it, or one other thing that I could think of is putting a switch statement inside use async and then returning it, which is a little cumbersome. So like you can check if status is idle and then return error status data run and then do the same thing, but inside switch statements. So that would actually persist that discriminatory union behavior.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. This should be different. Another option that I'm thinking about is maybe we just put state on here. And so you'd have run and state, and then you can pull user could just pull stuff off. And I think that would be the easiest implementation. And for users, maybe not the best, but like I don't think it's actually bad.
Yeah, I
So-
guess that was there in the previous exercise. I guess you did this because you run was added to it. So calling it state didn't make a lot of sense. That's why you, I guess that's the reason that you gave. But yeah, but we need to somehow persist the types as well.
Yeah, I wonder if I wonder if we actually returned or just added run to state and then just return that, or do like an object assign thing. I don't know whether that would preserve things or not. Probably not, but yeah, as far as like accepting a PR for this, I don't know. If you really want to, then that's fine. But just know that this file is used in a bunch of or this functionality is used in a bunch of the workshops. And so I'd want it to be the same across all of them. And so if you do want to do that and you applied it to all of them, then I would accept that, all those PRs, but I don't want to just change one of them. I'm not personally going to make any changes to this because I'm just focused on other things now. But yes, thank you for bringing this up. That's definitely a problem and an annoyance. And yeah, if I were to build something like this today, I would absolutely make a change so that I could have that discriminated union.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Thank you for bringing that up. And yeah, definitely appreciate a PR, but don't feel like you have to. Yeah, it's people can, I don't know how many people are even looking at this anyway. Maybe more than I think. But all right, cool. Anybody else in Discord have a question before I go up to this one? Okay, sweet. Let's answer this question from Swappy. Requirement in the app for a particular section. That section has a bunch of drop downs, a couple of checkboxes, and a button which triggers an API call based on the selection. The drop downs are interdependent. So changing the selection of any one drop down will have some business logic, which will change the list of other drop downs. Also, selection of one drop down would enable or disable some checkboxes. So basically, a bunch of stuff interdependent on each other with lots of business logic for each of them, as they have their own logic of lists. Okay, great. So the questions are, would you recommend use reducer hooks since the state is complex and they are all dependent on each other? Or would you recommend that each component manages its own state and receives props and apply its own logic to figuring out the list? Would you recommend maintaining separate state for selection of those dropdowns of checkboxes? Note this state is for whatever has been selected and not the list of the dropdown. And 3, would you, what would be the testing approach here? What would you test? We use Puppeteer screenshot testing, but also have RTL set up. Okay, so I'll answer this last one first. I would not use screenshot testing for this. I think what you're talking about is a bunch of logic that you want to test. I mean, you could use screenshot testing for like some stuff, but I wouldn't like change one thing, screenshot it, change another thing, screenshot it. Like that, I think would be useless. For the logic, if you want to test the logic, then yeah, testing the lower level of like, what I would do is I'd have all of the stuff in all of the logic in a separate function that says like, here's the current state of things and here's the change that was just made. What should my state of things be now? And I would test that. And more specifically, what I would do is I would not use reducer. This sounds way more complicated than use reducer. I would 100% without a doubt use xstate for this. So if you go to xstate.js.org, then this will, yeah, give you a bunch of stuff, and the visualizer would totally be amazing for something like this. So come on, visualize. Here we go. So you get like a way to visualize the different flows, and it's amazing. It really, it's fantastic what you can do. And on top of that, Stately, which is the company behind xstate, has a really awesome editor where you can like drag and drop and do a bunch of stuff. I would 100%, and then this turns into code, and then you can like do the inverse as well. I would 100% use xstate for what you're describing. Sounds way simpler, And then, so you have all the state being managed outside of things. As the user's making changes, you're dispatching events and things, and that state feeds back into your components for the updates that need to happen. Yeah, that's exactly how I would do it. I'll take a look at this really briefly. Yeah, so it looks like, yeah, just bunch of stuff for lack of a better term. I don't think that it's totally necessary for me to dive into this. Yeah, you're like, with this simple thing, you're already getting to what I would consider to be quite complex. You're going to get this to be way simpler by using xstate. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be way better. Easier to maintain over time, to make changes to, especially the visualization ability. Like, you can actually show this to your PM who is like, hey, there's a problem with this. And so you bring them over to this and you're like, well, when they get to this state, what do you want them to be able to do? You want them to be able to add this thing or not? And so then you can make changes. And like, is this the way that you want it to work? Yes, that's the way. Okay, sweet. So let's generate the code for that. And then we'll plug in our React components to make all that work. That's what I would do. So I will share a link here. Use stately and xstate 100%. Good luck. Let me just make sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, tons of interdependent logic, 100% use xstate. Okay. Great. TBCO, really appreciate your help, by the way, in that there was another channel in Epic React where you were going back and forth with somebody, really helping them out. I think it was with setup of the workshop. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Okay, answering this now. Okay, so let me make sure that I understand or remember what was going on. Okay, so it was working because you were looking at the wrong code or the wrong thing. Okay, that actually makes me feel better because I was very confused why it could have been working. Yeah, no worries. Watch later. Take care of that baby. Yeah, here, let's see. Here's the recording. Okay, sweet. Coming back up to the question. Still interested how the ref works. Okay, cool. So we're using it in conjunction with useEffect, so it only ran once on mount. So yeah, here's the component itself. We've got a div with the ref, my ref is set to just this use ref. We have the set interval that is making it visible and invisible. And when it's not visible, we don't render it at all. Yeah, so this is, I can explain this. Assuming we know how the internal vanilla tilt, or because it's not top root, only works page load, not after. Okay, yeah. So in the case, let me explain what is happening here, and then maybe that will help answer some of the questions here. So on the initial render, we're going to get a ref. We're going to get our visible state. It'll initialize to true. We'll set up the set interval, which is actually going to just be using useEffect and a couple of things. Latest ref for this callback here, or for this callback here. And every 2,000 milliseconds, it'll trigger this callback. Then we're setting up a useEffect to initialize vanilla tilt on our tilt node.current, or our tilt ref.current, which is going to be a tilt node. Sorry, one second. I need to look at that message that I just got, make sure that it's not urgent. Oops. Okay, I'm gonna need just a second. It says urgent. we're going to take a quick break, and I will finish explaining this in a moment. I apologize for the interruption. Okay. Whew. Sorry about that. As I said, it was urgent, so I needed to do it right away. And so I apologize for interrupting our time together. Okay, coming back. We are back up here. Okay, so I'll start over. So when we first render, we're going to create a ref. We're going to create a visible that's going to be set to true. We're going to queue up this interval. This oh, hold on a second. This set interval is not okay. For some reason, I read that as use interval. That is not. This is a set interval. You're going to be in a world of hurt with this. Now, I know that you're just making a demo and stuff, but just very important that you understand, do not call set interval inside the render body of your function. You will ultimately create thousands of intervals potentially if, as you know, the user keeps this up, because this is going to trigger a re-render. This will run again. Whoops, hit the escape key. This will run again, creating a new interval. And now you've got 2 intervals. Both of those will run, and now you've got 4 intervals. Both of those will run again. Now you've got, you know, and it just keeps on going to thousands and thousands of intervals, maybe many more. Let's see, if we had 2 to the 60th, yeah, lots. So even after just 1 minute, well, I guess it would be, you get 60 divided by 2 would be 30. So it'd be 2 to the 30th after a minute, right? Yeah, there you go. After 1 minute, you'll end up with 1 billion intervals running. Not a good thing. So I know that this is just a demo thing, but if you want to know how to do intervals with React, then use interval overreacted from Dan's overreacted blog. He shows how to do this properly. So I'll add a link to that there. Anyway, so let's assume that you're using use interval. In our situation, that will cause the same problem that you're describing. So this will toggle it back and forth. We also say, hey, use effect. Great. Sorry, somebody's at the door. I don't think that it's going to be urgent. It's probably, yep, it's just the kid's friend who cannot play right now anyway. So yeah, we've got a use effect, queuing this up to initialize vanilla tilt onto our div. And then if we're visible, then we'll render the div. So here's what's going to happen on the next, or in the next 2 seconds. We're going to say set visible to the opposite. So it's no longer visible. This will all run again. Our use effect will not run again because we have an empty dependency array. And so this is going to return null. That means this div is going to unmount. It's going to be removed from the DOM. That div no longer exists. And so interestingly, that means that vanilla tilt is still initialized on that div. So the div does exist, but just in memory. It will not exist in the DOM. But vanilla tilt is hanging on to references to that div. So we're in trouble there. We've got a memory leak. And so then on the next tick, or the next time this runs, we're going to create this div. It will be a brand new div. Its ref will be set. So my ref.current is going to be set to that div. But because this use effect doesn't run again, we are not going to have vanilla tilt initialized. And that's probably what you observed, was like, hey, the vanilla tilt's not initialized here. So what do we do about this empty array thing? So this is just an important thing to understand, is that there is no way for you to know when that that ref is changed. That's the idea behind the ref. So there are a couple of options for you. Yeah, so under the hood, what's going on is when React mounts this div, it takes this ref object and it says, I created this div. Now let me set the current property on that ref to be this div. And so then when the use effect runs, it has access to that div because React set that current property. And on that second re-render, or that next time when you remove it and then you add a new one, that's a completely new DOM node. And so vanilla tilt has not been initialized on it. This use effect will not run, and it cannot run. We have no way to say, hey, I want to run this use effect again, because there's no state here that says that, oh, hey, we've got a new div, sort of. Because we could actually put this visible in the dependency array, and that will trigger use effect to go again. So what would make sense if I were building it exactly like this, the most sensible thing to do would be to say, hey, I don't want this use effect to run if we're not visible. It wouldn't make any sense. Yeah, today we start as true, and so that works, but in the future, maybe we'll start as false. And so it wouldn't make sense to initialize vanilla tilt on something that's not visible anyway. And so I would put visible in here, and then I would say, if visible, then do all of this stuff. Otherwise, don't bother doing anything. And that will solve your problem. Boom, it's solved. Yeah, another alternative is actually this ref can accept a callback. They don't recommend doing this, and I wouldn't recommend doing this either, but you can have a callback here that accepts the node, and then you can do whatever you want to with it. So you can initialize vanilla tilt in there instead of the use effect. The reason why I don't recommend this is because there's no way to clean up. At least there's no way to clean up inside of that callback. You could wire up a new use effect that's just responsible for cleanup, but why would you do that? It seems kind of weird. And it also, yeah, it would be very non-ergonomic. It would not be ergonomic. So yeah, what I would do in this situation is I would say, hey, I don't want to trigger or initialize vanilla tilt when it's not visible. So let's add that if visible here. When you do that, now you need to have that added to the dependency array. The thing that we can take away from this is refs do not trigger re-renders. There's no way for you to know when a ref is changed. And that's part of the appeal of refs, is that they don't trigger re-renders. And so when you're dealing with them in a use effect, you do need to think about, okay, when could this change, and do I care? Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. That's what's going on. Okay, good luck with baby duty. Dario, I have a question about a dependency array in use effect hook. Don't we all? Could you explain, if any, the difference between the following two components? So we've got example 1, example 2. React use effect here with the prop 1 and prop 2, and then we have a check in here that does something if prop 1 is A and prop 2 is B, and then example 2 takes that condition and moves it outside, and then it says if condition, then do something. So there is technically no functional difference between these two, if this is all that it was doing. But you could run into a difference. You're certainly going to run into a difference into how frequently those use effects are going to be called. So an example would be, let's say that first render prop 1 and prop 2 are equal to A and B respectively. In both cases, the use effects is going to run for both of these because it's the initial run. And in fact, if you're in strict mode, it'll actually run twice. But let's pretend we're not in strict mode to make it simpler. So yeah, they're both going to run once, just because for the fact that effects always run on the first render. So then let's change prop 2 from B to C. Now this one is going to run again, but do something will not run, but it does run again because this prop 2 is now changed. Same here, because condition will now be false. Before it was true, now that prop 2 is C, it is going to be false. And so this will run again, do something again, will not run. So that also is good. Now let's change prop 1 to B, and or we'll put it to Z. So prop 1 is now Z. We're going to run this. This will run again. This use effect will run again. Do something will not run because this condition will be false. But our use effect does run. In example 2, however, the condition last time was false. This time it will be false again. And so our condition is false again. And so therefore our use effect will not run. So this is like, just functionally, they work the same. Practically, they do not. And like when you think about, okay, when does this use effect run? If you were facing a situation like this, I would actually go with this. I try to put as much of my effect-based logic in the effect rather than extracting stuff. And the reason for that is often it's not just a condition. Often it's an object, or it's a function, or whatever it is. And as much as I can stuff that into the use effect and just pass primitive values to my array, it just really simplifies things for me. So let me give you one other piece of information on this. Myths about use effect, I think, is where I put this. It is, I think it's the last thing. Yeah, needlessly externally defined functions, where I talk about if you have your use effect and then you try to externalize, like have different functions and stuff, it just really makes things harder than if you just put everything in the body of the use effect. So I'm going to share that too. It's not exactly related, but it sort of is related. And I just finished answering that one. Dario, I hope that helps. Good luck. Okay, I answered Nick's question. Darius, thank you again. And Anonymous is asking, who am I and what do I do? So I am the Director of Developer Experience at Remix. And if you want to get to know me further, then you can go to my website and watch the video that I spent a bunch of money, probably too much money on this silly video, describing who I am. And so you can go watch that. And that is it. Thanks everybody for joining. It was a good time. Sorry for that little break in the middle. And I hope you all have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend.